Question of the day. What is the best R-rated comic book movie of all time? And when will all the studios in Hollywood learn their lesson and stop trying to stuff an R-rated film into a PG-13 skin? Let's talk about it. Welcome to a Comic Power Special Report. And today the subject is going to be the history of R-rated comic book films. Now here we go. First off, you have to understand that the movie studios are risk averse. They never really took comic book movies very seriously. They viewed them as silly, summer, popcorn, action flicks, and would be very attractive to teenage boys who's out for school during the summer. So by all means, the studios insisted on these movies being PG-13. So the studios wouldn't have to worry about losing money with that whole, if the movie is rated R, then you have to be accompanied by your parent type of thing. But let's face it, the parents are at work or on vacation themselves. The kids are just getting dropped off at the mall, and take your little brother with you. So they're going to see multiple action movies, and as long as they're G, PG, or PG-13, no parent needed. And the studios are hoping they keep it PG-13, they pack them deep, sell them cheap, and get that $1 billion plus Avengers money. But here's the problem. Not every superhero franchise should be PG-13. There are characters in their universes that should be rated R, such as Deadpool, The Punisher, Wolverine, Deathstroke, Daredevil if you're doing the Frank Miller type. Now let's look at this. Remember that Fox owned the X-Men, which included Deadpool. And Fox was dragging their feet on this project until some test footage leaked and forced their hand and made them put out a movie because everyone reacted so positively to it. And Ryan Reynolds still had to fight the studio to make it rated R. He won that battle, but like I said, studios are risk averse, so they only gave the project $58 million on the budget. Fox was thinking if this flopped, then hey, it's only $58 million as opposed to the $150 million or more for a big budget superhero movie. But Deadpool comes out in 2016 and not only becomes a hit, becomes a huge hit, making $782 million, and it doesn't even play in China. So the studio smartened up and said, oh, we can actually make money making these things rated R when they're supposed to be rated R. And we don't have to stuff an R-rated franchise into a PG-13 skin because you're not being true to the material and it's going to show on the screen and hurt. So the next one up is the dystopian future of Wolverine in the movie Logan. Fox smartly makes it rated R and it makes $619 million on a $120 million budget. So we got another hit. Deadpool Part 2 comes out in 2018 and it unites all of Rob Field's three most famous characters, Deadpool, Cable, and Domino. Once again, violent, raunchy, and R-rated, and makes $785 million on a $110 million budget. So Fox's competition, Warner Brothers, who are a bunch of idiots, says, we're greedy, let's make the Joker R-rated. And they do so in 2019 and it blows the lid off. On a budget of this $70 million, it makes $1 billion. And Joaquin Phoenix becomes the first actor in a comic book movie to win the Oscar for Best Actor. So Warner Brothers are true believers now, so they put out Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey in early 2020, but it doesn't do that well because it's just a forgettable type of movie. It had nothing to do with the rating. And then they try to fix the Suicide Squad movie they messed up in 2016 by redoing it as rated R instead of PG-13. With James Gunn of Guardians fame directing. But we're in the middle of the pandemic and it's released on both HBO Max and the theaters at the same time. So this one's kind of hard to measure in numbers, but I like it better than the first Suicide Squad movie. Because in the first one, the lead characters were Harley Quinn, Deadshot, and the Joker. If you put these characters in the Batman film, it should be PG-13 because Batman doesn't kill. So he's right there on the edge of PG-13 and R. But the movie was telling the story from the perspective of anti-heroes and villains, so it should have been rated R because those characters kill like you breathe air all the time. But wait, there's more. Some people forget about the comic book movies that were made by Zack Snyder, including 300 from 2006. This was based on the Frank Miller comic of the same name that was released by Dark Horse. It's R-rated, gory, with over-the-top violence, but makes sense for the material. And it made $456 million on just a $65 million budget. And it's still one of my favorite movies of the 2000s, and a lot of people didn't even know it was a comic book-based movie. He followed this up with the brilliant Watchmen in 2009 based on the Alan Moore miniseries. A R-rated deconstruction of superheroes, and this was 11 years before The Boys came out on Amazon. The general public wasn't ready for this. It only made $185 million on a $138 million budget, so that's technically a flop, but it became a big hit on rental. A lot of Hollywood executives are cocaine addicted imbeciles, but they're also very greedy cocaine addicted imbeciles. And they know there's a big market for sci-fi action dude movies that are rated R that they can make for a modest budget and have a very good rate of return. Like the comic book film Blade, released in 1998 starring Wesley Snipes. A vampire hunting story with a lot of gore, and a lot of people didn't even know it's based on a comic book. It produced 2 sequels, Blade Part 2 and Blade Trinity. It let the industry know in Hollywood that you could make a movie series based on a comic book, and it didn't have to be Batman or Superman. There's a previous video I made about this, giving Blade credit for making the MCU possible, because based on the success of Blade, Marvel was able to borrow the money from Merrill Lynch to start the MCU. Be sure to check that out. Then there's Sin City, released in 2005 with a film noir look with an anthology style based on Frank Miller's comic of the same name from Dark Horse Comics. Probably the only movie that Jessica Alba has ever been in that was actually good. The first film was a hit, but they waited 9 years to release the sequel and it flopped. Then there's Kingsman: The Secret Service, released in 2014, loosely based on the Mark Millar Pixar comic The Secret Service. It was a surprise hit, making $414 million on just a $90 million budget. It produced a sequel in 2017, Kingsman: The Golden Circle. It was another hit, making $410 million on just a $105 million budget. And then they did part 3, which was just a prequel called The Kingsman. And unfortunately, it got caught up in the pandemic and only made $126 million on a $100 million budget. Hollywood did take a shot at one of the most important indie comic characters of all time in Judge Dredd and gave it the big budget and the big name with Sylvester Stallone playing the title character. Unfortunately, it flopped as a very weak screenplay, and Stallone took off his helmet. Dredd never takes off his helmet. That's a cardinal sin. Hollywood tried again in 2012 with Carl Urban as the lead. It's much better than the Stallone film, and Carl never takes off his helmet, so points for that. Unfortunately, it flopped. It only made about $41 million on a $40 million budget. I think its timing was bad. It was the same year that Marvel dominated with the first Avengers movie, and then you had Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. And personally, movies may not be the right format for Judge Dredd. I think it might work better as a detective episodic TV series. So I'll come back to that theory in another video later. V for Vendetta, released in 2006, is an underappreciated gem. It's directed by the Wachowski siblings who gave us The Matrix. The actor who played Agent Smith in The Matrix and the Red Skull plays the lead of V in this. Natalie Portman is tremendous. She's so good in everything. It's based on British comic book writer Alan Moore's graphic novel of the same name, and technically it was a flop, making only $132 million on a $54 million budget, but the movie inspired real revolutionaries all over the world to wear disc masks, as we had to fight the powers that be. It seems like all the Punisher movies are forgotten, especially the Dolph Lundgren version. This is the actor who said, "I must break you" in Rocky IV. To be honest, I never saw this movie. It's got terrible reviews. I got no financial information about it. It feels like it never happened. Hollywood tried again in 2004 with Thomas Jane playing the lead role. The movie was just okay, I guess. John Travolta's in it as well. It made $54 million on just a $33 million budget. Not a great return. Hollywood tried again in 2008 with The Punisher War Zone, with Ray Stevenson in the lead this time. Once again, the story is just okay. It doesn't really capture the Punisher the way I think it should be. It was a massive failure, only making $10 million on a $30 million budget. Ouch. And remember, this was not Marvel Studios making this. Lionsgate had the American rights and Sony had the international rights. The Punisher did work as a web series on Netflix, tied into the Defenders universe when Netflix and Marvel was working together. So Hollywood did try some R-rated comic book movies before. Some of them were highly acclaimed and made big box office, like the Kingsman and the Blade trilogy. Some of them were critically acclaimed but didn't do very well at the box office, like V for Vendetta and Dredd. At least they had the guts to make them and make them rated R the way they're supposed to. I'm very critical of Hollywood, but they did try. Not trying is like this bozo right here. This guy oversaw one of the biggest disasters in the history of superhero movies. Now let's move on to the comic book movies that should have been rated R, but for some reason Hollywood tried to push into a PG-13 box, such as the first 2 Wolverine movies, X-Men Origins Wolverine and The Wolverine. I've already talked about the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie being one of the worst superhero movies of all time. Will.i.am should not be in a comic book movie. The CGI was horrible. Of course, what they did to Deadpool, oh man. Wow. But my point today is, if you do a Wolverine solo project, it should be rated R. He's an R-rated character. When Wolverine is in an X-Men movie, yes, it should be PG-13. He's not the lead character. Professor X is the lead character and sets the tone on that film. Xavier's character is sort of like a surrogate father to Wolverine and his moral conscience. But a solo Wolverine movie, especially before he became an X-Men, should be a big blood trail that's overrun with bodies like the movie 300 and earned its R rating. And of the 3 Wolverine movies, guess which one is the best? Oh, Logan, the one that was rated R. And yes, the professor is in the movie, but he dies about halfway through, and then the bloodlust just gets bigger and bigger. This is Wolverine in his element, and it works best this way. Another character whose franchise should be rated R is Venom. And remember, Sony is in charge of this, and they're deciding to make it PG-13. I can't think of a character that should be more rated R than Venom. Come on, bruh. He made his debut as the lethal protector, eating brains. Venom 1 was a big hit at the box office, but I think people were just curious to see a good Venom because the one in Spider-Man 3 was just awful. Part 2, when he fought Woody Harrelson as Carnage, had about half the box office. I have no idea why Sony still tries to keep Venom in a PG-13 box. Sony used to have the rights to Ghost Rider, and they made 2 of those movies with Nicolas Cage. They're terrible, but they should have been rated R, and they forced them into a PG-13 anyway. Ghost Rider should be an R-rated horror story. Speaking of horror stories, Hellboy had 2 movies released in 2004 and 2008 with Ron Perlman. They're pretty good movies, but they would have been better if they would have been rated R and let Hellboy be who he really is. He was created by Mike Mignola for Dark Horse Comics, and I think they kind of neutered him in the movies. They tried to reboot Hellboy in 2019 with David Harbour playing the lead character, and this time, smartly, they did make it rated R, but they also dumbly released it 2 weeks before Avengers Endgame, so it had no chance. and a lot of people never even knew it came out, and it just got steamrolled. Another also should have been rated R was Bloodshot, which came out in 2020. Valiant Comics has some great superheroes, and this was their first live action movie in association with Sony. I love Valiant. They not only have Bloodshot, but they got the Eternal Warrior, Exo Man of War, and the Harbinger franchise, and Shadow Man. And they got Vin Diesel, who's a pretty big star to play the lead, but it was a pretty weak movie in terms of script, and it was released in early 2020 when the pandemic hit and it shut down all theaters, so it never had a chance anyway. So it had bad luck in terms of its timing, but it never should have been a PG-13 movie. Bloodshot is sort of like Wolverine meets Deathlock, a bloody story where Frankenstein's monster gets away. Vin Diesel was also the star of The Chronicles of Riddick, which definitely should have been rated R, and somehow or another they tried to make this PG-13, and that didn't work either. Another forgotten R-rated comic book movie from 1996 was Bob Wire, starring Pamela Anderson Lee. Most people have never heard of this, but the people who have heard of it didn't even know it was based on a comic book released by Dark Horse Comics. It's supposed to be taking place in the deep future of 2017. Her character is a mercenary operating in the Second Civil War of America. It was kind of cheesy, but it wasn't that bad, but it bombed at the box office, only making $4 million on a $9 million budget. Damn. Another R-rated comic book movie that's forgotten, but is actually pretty good, is Kick-Ass, released in 2010. This is another creation of Mark Millar, the same creator who did Kingsman: The Secret Service. It's the breakout role of Aaron Taylor Johnson, who went on to play Quicksilver in the MCU for a short period of time. A sequel was released in 2013, but it was pretty weak at the box office. Chloe Grace Moretz was excellent as Hit Girl, and you should see these movies if you missed them. That moves us to future plans for R-rated characters, and what will Disney do now that they got their rights back to some of them, such as Deadpool. Remember, those first two movies were made by Fox, and now that Fox was bought out by Disney, they got the rights back and they're over at Marvel. Well, they try to put him in the MCU, considering that the MCU has had 30 plus movies now, and all of them have been PG-13. But Disney isn't stupid. They know the fans would rebel if they decide to neuter Deadpool and make him PG-13. With the multiverse, I think they have the opportunity to put him in this own little pocket universe. Keep it rated R and keep the fans happy, and then make him go through a wormhole and appear in some other movie like Spider-Man as a guest star. But in his own film, it's gotta be rated R, so I don't know what Disney is going to do with it, but you have to make it rated R. And Deadpool has plenty of weird antagonists for him to fight, like Slayback and Death Trap, and of course the Mercy Sisters, who are gun-toting mercenaries that dress like Britney Spears on her Hit Me Baby One More Time phase. So yeah, keep the lunacy and keep it rated R at Deadpool. I'm already hearing on the reboot of Blade starring Mahershala Ali, it's going to be PG-13, and I don't know how I feel about that. If you're going to do a vampire slaying story and it's going to be PG-13, then it should be Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But if you're going to do a real dramatic action horror vampire story, it should be more like True Blood, which definitely is rated R in terms of its material, being that it was an HBO series. Blade is not Buffy. Blade is closer to True Blood, so Blade should be rated R. So I don't know how Marvel's going to handle this. And Marvel's got the rights back to Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider, so are they going to make that PG-13 too? So is Marvel going to unite all of its horror universe with the Midnight Suns and Spirits of Vengeance and try to make it PG-13? If you're going to do that, then you shouldn't do the horror universe at all, in my opinion. Or you should have made them all a dark R-rated web series like they did with Daredevil and the Defenders on Netflix. Because if I see a Midnight Suns team-up movie starring Blade, Ghost Rider, and Nathan Hellstrom, and it's not rated R, I don't know how I'm going to be able to take that. And I don't know if I can trust that it'll be right in a PG-13 skin. Alright, now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to name what I think are the top 10 R-rated comic book movies of all time. Remember, this is my personal list. You'll get a chance to say what you think in the comment section. Number 10, Deadpool Part 2. This unites Liefeld's big three with Deadpool, Cable, and Domino, and it's the first out-of-the-closet LGBT comic book characters ever in a film. Number 9, Kingsman: The Secret Service. This is probably the best R-rated espionage spy film that I ever saw. This is what it would look like if James Bond was ever R-rated. Number 8, V for Vendetta, an underrated gem that is a great film about revolutionaries and inspired real revolutionaries in real life too. Number 7, Logan, by far the best solo Wolverine movie, with all the carnage that a solo Wolverine movie should have. Number 6, Watchmen, one of 2 films from Zack Snyder on this list. It's a brilliant deconstruction of superheroes, and it's way before its time. If it came out now, it would have been a big hit. Number 5, Sin City, not just drawn and written by Frank Miller, but also directed by him. A dark dystopian film noir crime drama thriller. It's really, really, really good. Number 4, Deadpool Part 1. The success of this film in 2016 gave studios the green light to make R-rated characters R-rated in the film like they're supposed to be, instead of trying to make them PG-13. It gives no apologies for its sex violence and crude jokes. Fans love it. Number 3, The Joker. A real deranged tale about a man's descent into madness and taking others with him in a debacle of insanity. It's the first comic book movie to earn a Best Actor Oscar. Number 2, Blade. This horror vampire hunting story and its success in the late 90s proved that you could have a successful franchise based on a comic book that wasn't named Batman or Superman. And number 1, ding 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 ding, 300, also from Zack Snyder, a more than successful adaptation of Frank Miller's source material from Dark Horse, about a small group of Greek Spartans taking on an overwhelming Persian army. A real 5-star film and one of the best films of the 2000s regardless of genre. So the questions of the day. It's a given that Deadpool will continue to be rated R under the Disney umbrella, but what will they actually do with it? Will it be connected to the MCU, or will it be in its own pocket universe? What do you think? Will Disney be making a mistake if they try to make Blade, Ghost Rider, or the Midnight Suns team-up movie PG-13? So answer those questions and tell me what are your favorite R-rated comic book movies of all time? Or what is your one single favorite of all time? Were there any R-rated comic book films that I missed that were worth talking about? Go to the comment section and speak your mind. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, give it a thumbs up, and tell everyone you know about this channel to help it grow. And share it on the social media format of your choice. And check out some of my previous videos such as the origin and history of Deadpool, and a video I made explaining how the success of Blade made it possible for the MCU to come about. Thank you for your time.